Hello, and thank you for joining me for Samuel in Springtime. Today is Monday, May 17th, and we're looking at the 17th chapter of the first book of Samuel. As you may remember, Samuel has anointed a boy in the household of Jesse named David, and he has come to court to play a calming instrument, music for King Saul, who is tormented by an evil spirit. And the reader knows, the inside knowledge is that the spirit of the Lord has left Saul and has come upon this young boy David. David is at court playing this lyre. I don't know how to pronounce it, but this is some kind of instrument that he plays very well because he's a very accomplished young man. And in this story, we have nothing of his musical talents, and Saul doesn't remember who he is at all. In fact, at the end of the story, because of what happens, Saul's inquiring again and again who this child is, whose son he is. So, odd thing, right? In the very beginning, we understand that they're ready for battle. The Philistines and the Israelites are on opposing hilltops with a valley in between them, and the melee or the bloodbath will ensue. However, the Philistines come up with a better solution. They have a champion, and they send their champion in. And I think you've seen this probably in films or know about historical battles, where instead of letting our people all kill each other, let's just send two champions to the middle, and then whoever's champion wins becomes the servant of the other. And so this is maybe the first representation of that in our Judeo-Christian history. This is what they propose. And so they have this big champion, and he's an extra large person. And nobody can defeat him. He has huge armor, and he's described here very big cubits, lots of cubits, and nobody could defeat him. And they're all kind of buzzing about what's going on. Now, David's three oldest brothers are at the battlefield. They're following Saul into battle, as a good, part of the Israelite army would do. And because David's younger, he's going back and forth to the battlefield, bringing provisions to his brothers and providing for them. And as he's in there, he's looking around and snooping basically on what's going on with the battle. And his oldest brother rebukes him for that and says, "Listen, I know what you're doing, your evil heart. I know where you're just snooping around. You're trying to figure out what's going on." And David protested. He said, I don't believe that this will succeed because the Lord our God is on our side. And this uncircumcised Philistine can't get anywhere when you're talking about God. And so Saul's generals, they send for him. They get wind that he's talking like this. And he says he can beat Goliath. And they protest and they say, no, you're a very small man and you can't do it. And so they say, okay, if you think you can do it, we'll send you out there. So Saul gives him his best armor, and he can't even walk with it. I mean, we've seen this story before. You know the story. He can't even walk with it. Says, you know what? Just keep the armor, and I'll go meet the Philistine in the valley. And he told the king, he said, yeah, I can beat him. I killed lions, and, protecting my sheep in the field. This is what I do. I'm a shepherd. So he says, against Goliath. So he goes against Goliath, and Goliath sees him far off and says he can recognize that he's ruddy and young, and he has a staff and 5 stones and a slingshot. That's all he's got. And Goliath sees him and says, wish I could remember. Am I a dog that you come to me with sticks? No. To clarify, and not to get nitpicky, he's only got the one stick. Right? He has a staff, a slingshot, and 5 stones. So he comes. So this is where I'm going to introduce the Malcolm Gladwell exegesis. He does a good job of talking about how what we would see as an insurmountable odds, someone else would see as an easy target. So here's the first thing. Goliath was likely the victim of acromegaly, which is a condition where the human growth hormone excretes too much growth hormone and in childhood, and you get giantism from that. Now there's a whole bunch of other conditions around that. If you remember the French actor, Andre the Giant lived to be 46. I'm 46, just turned 46. So it's not a very long time to live. And he gave up his life in order to maintain his, career as a celebrity, because this acromegaly is treatable, but you might lose some of your strength and power. But you also have other conditions that kind of go along with it. Your organs grow and you have vision problems. And so what Malcolm Gladwell thinks is that when he says, you come to me with sticks, and David only has the one stick, the staff in his hand, he says that he sees double. His vision isn't good because he's got this condition, and nobody knows. I mean, actually back then he was just a miracle that he was so big, and that he has all kinds of quickness problems. Like he couldn't move very fast. He's very strong, but he couldn't move very fast. And here's this young guy who can play an instrument, and he is a slingshot master because he's out there with the sheep in the field. Now, Malcolm Gladwell also goes into what it means to have a slingshot in those days. And it's not like this kind of thing. It is a large, long, and there's a pocket on the end of it, and you rotate and rotate it. In the battles of this day and age, archers were very proficient, but beyond the archers, this was the closest thing they had to a gun, right? Because of the heaviness of the stone and the accuracy and the force with which the stone would hit you. If you're a lion or a tiger, or you're coming or a wolf or something, and you come in for the sheep. He was very accurate and proficient with this slingshot. And it gave him an advantage over Goliath because Goliath was slow, lumbering. Goliath's vision wasn't that great. And so David comes out there. He's nimble. He's agile. He's got basically what in those days would have been a gun against Goliath, who had, a sword and some heavy armor. And he wins the day. And then Malcolm Gladwell's point is, it doesn't always look like what it is. Now, that totally takes the faith completely out of the story, because the significance of this story is that David consistently claimed that it was God's power that would help him defeat Goliath. And indeed, that is a lesson the people were to be learning as they read this story later, because you see Saul again and again hedging his bets by doing not completely obeying God. He's trying to give a sacrifice. He's running in there too quickly. He's trying to listen to what the people are doing and mitigate some bad things happening in his area. So Saul is continually sort of breaking with God and going his own way. And even the people are, when they said, we want a king, they're doing the same thing. And here you have David juxtaposed against that, saying, yeah, I'm young. Yeah, I'm just a kid. Yeah, I've never seen battle before. Yeah, I'm not going to wear your armor, but I'm going to defeat Goliath anyway. And everyone was scared of him. But David wasn't, because David's like, I have God on my side. This uncircumcised Philistine, no one, he cannot win the day. Our God is stronger than that. Our God is bigger than that. So you see him juxtaposed directly, to me at least, against Saul's faithlessness and trying to how much can I manipulate in this situation, because I don't have enough faith that God will carry me through. But David has enough faith that God will carry him through, and says from the day he was born, God has been with me, and God will be with me. God's out there with me when I've, fought the lion to save the sheep. And his belief in himself and his confidence in God was what carried the day. So that's really the lesson of David and Goliath, not necessarily that you never, what is the issue, I guess, with Malcolm Gladwell's book David and Goliath, that's and his exegesis of this, is that you the things look like advantages on the surface, but they're really not, and you never know who might be smaller or have less um, abilities or on the surface, but may be able to work around those disabilities and win the day nonetheless. So there's tons of other examples in the book. It's a really good book. But he uses this as his guiding light throughout this idea that when what looks like insurmountable odds on the surface, the reality is something different. Goliath was slow. Goliath had vision problems, and David could basically shoot a gun because that slingshot was so accurate and so deadly. So let's go back a little bit to the Saw David part, because I want to be contiguous, because this isn't just a story by itself. It is held within the whole narrative of the kings of Israel. And Saul is still king of Israel when they meet the Philistines on the hill versus hill with the valley in the middle battle, and Goliath and David. So David is now a hero, and Saul cannot figure out who he is. And that's what's confusing. At the very end of the chapter, Saul keeps asking, "Who are you? Whose son are you?" And it seems like in the chapter previous, we learned that Saul loved David and appreciated him being there. Maybe the timing is a little off, and this happened before David came to play the lyre, or maybe this is just an example of the deterioration of Saul's mind and soul in what he's experienced since David has been anointed and the Spirit of God has left him. And the last words of this chapter are, David said, "I am the son of your servant Jesse, the Bethlehemite." One of my favorite words, the Bethlehemite. So David becomes a known hero of Israel. He saves the day by killing Goliath. We're all familiar with this story from Sunday school, but if you're not familiar with this story, I'm glad that you have gotten to read it in its entirety for the first time, possibly, and that you understand what this means in context of the community of faith. This is an important thing. It's saying, here's David, and we're putting him up because we've mentioned before that he will be the next king. We're putting him up as over and above and opposed to a king who would try to go his own way and not completely trust in God. And this is David, a man after God's own heart. And David, with his heart tuned directly towards God and so much belief in God. So, David and Goliath. Good story. That's not the last good story in the book of 1 Samuel, though, so there's more to come. God bless you.